Quindi possiamo partire subito.
Aspetta, fammi vedere se c'è tutto aperto, sì, loro devono aprirsi.
It's a great pleasure to open this Sciascia Colloquium program that is testifying how much Sciascia is alive with his answer, but first of all with his questions. This life of Sciascia is in a way represented on the civic and not only literary field by the presence of Onorevole Emma Bonino and by Onorevole Della Vedova. I am happy to leave the podium to them, and I welcome also the Ambassador of Italy, Mariangela Zappia, and our Consul General, Fabrizio Di Michele. So the field is, I think we have Onorevole Bonino already online with us. We don't hear anything, so we need to open the microphone. C'è bisogno di aprire il microfono. Puoi venire tu, Massimo, magari qui? No, ma... Dove la vedi? Sì, ho già mandato questo. A parte che non si...
Ci sentite?
Sì, ti sento.
Però se non tolgono, dovreste appunto togliere, rendere possibile il microfono da parte vostra.
No, no.
All'interno? Non so chi sia. Chi è? No, questo sta arrivando.
Sto cercando, facciamo amore e vediamo cosa succede.
Mo' è sparito Benedetto, quindi.
Adesso finalmente la sentiamo. Onorevole, le lascio la parola, le do il benvenuto qui all'Istituto Italiano di Cultura. È sparita. Sì. Grazie Fabrizio. Sì, senatrice, non la vediamo più noi, non la sentiamo. Vediamo se si vede uno schermo buio.
No.
Non ho la minima idea di cosa stia succedendo. Oh, ecco. Allora, senatrice onorevole, buongiorno di nuovo.
Buongiorno.
La parola finché il collegamento tiene. Benvenuti, dicevo, in istituto abbiamo già i congressisti e l'ambasciatrice Mariangela Zappia e il console generale Fabrizio Di Michele sono qui. Vi lascio la parola, prego.
Good morning. Good morning to you all. It's a great pleasure for me to introduce these two rich days of discussion aimed at celebrating the centenary of the birth of Leonardo Sciascia, one of the most remarkable and iconic Italian writers of the 20th century. Let me thank Fabio Finotti, director of the Italian Cultural Institute in New York, the Italian ambassador to US, Mariangela Zappia, and last but not least, the National Committee for Sciascia's Centenary, chaired by Senator Emma Bonino.
Ciao.
The committee, together with the Italian Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation, has imagined and realized a series of Sciascia's lessons in the world. Over the last year, they were hosted with enthusiasm and success in many of our cultural institutes abroad, from Paris, Barcelona, Madrid, London, Valletta, San Francisco to Istanbul, Abu Dhabi, Moscow, and Tehran. The series of lectures has proved to be an important opportunity to take stock of Sciascia as a global writer and intellectual, focusing in particular on the legacy of his work in different cultural contexts, and on the translations recently published or in progress. From this point of view, the project is perfectly aligned with the broader action that our ministry has put in place in order to promote Italian literature in the world as a crucial aspect of our cultural diplomacy. In the context of this commitment, over the last 2 years, the Italian Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation has supported the translation of Sciascia's works in countries such as Spain, Croatia, Thailand, and Iran. In this sense, the centenary of Leonardo Sciascia's birth is a unique occasion to celebrate and revive the legacy of a great Italian, a writer, an intellectual, a politician, who was able to combine in an exquisitely humanistic vision the most lucid civil commitment with the most fervent literary art. He has always placed both literature and the Italian language at the service of observation and the masterful telling of reality. Sciascia is a giant, transcending national borders and building bridges between civilizations and cultures, revealing himself as authentically European and Mediterranean. And it is due to this capacity as a new Virgin, to quote Gore Vidal, that also thanks to the new monograph by Joseph Farrell, Leonardo Sciascia crosses the Atlantic and lands in the United States. The United States is a country he actually never set foot on. His father, Pasquale, on the other hand, had migrated to America and lived there years before returning to the village of Racalmuto in Sicily. But as Sciascia recalls, he never talked about it to us. And maybe this is one of the reasons why Leonardo himself, on the other hand, was to become passionately curious about a specific aspect of America, the America of literature, cinema, and freedom. Let me conclude by recalling a quote from Sciascia I'm particularly fond of. The name of a writer, the title of a book can sometimes, and to some, sound like that of a homeland. It is precisely as a metaphor for genius and creativity that the name of Sciascia and the titles of his works have a familiar ring. Celebrating his genius, therefore, means for us presenting the very essence of Italian culture to the world. Thank you for your attention. And I give the floor to Senator.
Your floor? Do I have a floor? Okay. I don't want to repeat what Benedetto said, so institutionally, etc. So I will add maybe some anecdotes that of my life with Sciascia. The first one was that one day he told me, look, Emma, to be short, you need time. And unfortunately, I don't have time these days, in these final days of such a terrible, brief electoral campaign. In any case, he also told me, look, I know that I am born in Sicily. I am a Sicilian. And just because I know where I have my root, I can afford myself to be everywhere in the world. Because I am Sicilian, because I have so strong roots in my country, and even more in my village where I've been born, I can afford myself to have a globalist view, and particularly a Western view of where we are going and what we are. He was a strong believer on the European Union and on the Western alliance of democracy. And thinking of these things these days, where we are all, let's say, confused. No, confused is not the right word, but we are scared of what is happening in the other part of the world. I don't know if and where Putin will stop to aggress countries from Crimea to Belarus. He didn't have to attack Belarus, he just bought Lukashenko or Ukraine, and everyone from Moldova to others are afraid. We should be too. And the courageous Ukrainians are fighting not only for their freedom, but they are fighting for our freedom. And it is our duty, no question about that, to help them. I know there are different views here and there, but I strongly believe that our duty is to help these courageous people. In this last day of the electoral campaign, we will have an initiative with Ukrainian refugees in Italy. They are begging us to stay firm, not to blink in face of Putin and others, by the way. But we have another problem that I want to tell you, is that we have Putin in our homeland, in Hungary, sometimes in Poland, people who believe that they could live better in Moscow than in Rome. I always wonder why he didn't stay there if it was so wonderful. In any case, this is a very important electoral campaign, but I want to go back to Sciascia. I am pretty sure, and I miss very much any comment by Leonardo Sciascia to this situation. From this part of the ocean to your part, I think there are strong connection, and we have to prevail, even if it needs time, sacrifice, etc., etc. But the sanctions are working, in my opinion. So Leonardo would say to me, keep on, keep on, keep on. Thank you very much, and thanks for having kept faith to the program you had in mind. You didn't change a single comma, notwithstanding everything. No, not everybody will have done this. Distracted by many difficulties, I imagine. So let me thank you, not only the director of the Institute of Culture, but also the ambassador in Washington. I know we met briefly, then you went to NATO, then you went to New York, then now you are in Washington. I hope sooner or later you will pass through Rome just to say hello to each other. Thank you all. Thank you very, very much for keeping alive under difficult times this memory of a great intellectual that never forgot to be Italian, but never limited himself to be Italian. Grazie. Grazie.
Grazie. Thank you so much. And now please welcome Ambassador Mariangela Zappia.
Thank you very much. And I don't see Undersecretary Della Vedova and Senator Emma Bonino anymore. I hope they can hear me. And it's difficult to add something more to what you have just said. Hello, now I see you. Very powerful messages. First of all, I want to, to join my voice to yours in thanking the Cultural Institute, in thanking certainly the National Committee for Sciascia Centenary. Particularly, I want to thank the Senator Bonino. Emma, un abbraccio particolare. Thank you to the director of the Cultural Institute. It's great to be here, and thank you for hosting this third chapter of this Viaggio Sciasciano, led by Valerio Capozzo, who is the president of the Associazione Amici di Sciascia in collaboration with Todomodo in New York. Difficult to say something more meaningful about Leonardo Sciascia after what I have heard. But what I have heard really brings me to give you a message. Emma Bonino told us how really important is the message that Leonardo Sciascia was giving through his writing, and how contemporary this message still is. I just want to say that for me, this is about really denouncing violence, is about denouncing venality and hypocrisy. And he did this really starting from his regional reality. And as Emma Bonino said, what is incredible about this message it's how it resonates, not only nationally, but also internationally, starting from the description of a very specific reality. And this is the greatness of Leonardo Sciascia. And this greatness has been rendered back also to some cinematographic production that we all remember. So his message is really very pertinent today. And I want to add to what Emma Bonino just said. I had the privilege to assisting our Prime Minister Draghi, in his participation to the 77th General Assembly. He left just yesterday night. He gave a very powerful speech in the General Assembly, and this speech was basically a message against violence, prevarication, the description of what we are unfortunately witnessing in Europe, but it was also a message about justice, and how justice, the rule of law will prevail. And for that to prevail, I think again to Leonardo Sciascia, when he recalled us to this sense of civic responsibility. We have a role to play as citizens, and I believe that the support that we are giving to the Ukrainian people in their fight to defend their country and to defend democracy in the end is also about that. And this is why we are supporting them. This is why we are sacrificing also our own, everyday life. But I think that this is the way really to push for that justice that one day will prevail. This is for me how modern is what Sciascia tells us even today. So I'm really grateful for these discussions. You will have a full day analyzing his messages, but again, they cannot be more relevant today for all of us. With that, I thank you again, Undersecretary Della Vedova, Senator Bonino, all of you here, and I'm very pleased to inaugurate this discussion today. Thank you so much.
Thank you for reminding us the link between literature and life, because the Italian Cultural Institute should be not a place of aesthetics, l'art pour l'art, as they said in last century, but a place where literature, culture intertwines life, civic responsibility, and even politics. And with this, I leave the floor to Valerio Capozzo, President of Friends of Leonardo Sciascia, who will introduce the colloquium. I don't see conclusions in closing with the name, but I hope that you will be also closing this 2 days, actually, because 1 day and a half of proceedings. So thank you so very much for being here.
Thank you very much for your insightful words, for Della Vedova, Senator Bonino, our ambassador, and last night, actually, our Consulate Generale that was telling us his memories about Palermo and what was happening at that time. And thank you very much to Fabio Finotti for guesting us. It's a great pleasure to be here in this long journey that actually we started more than a year ago to organize all that. I think you all underline the fact that Sciascia is a global writer, and we are totally agree with that. So the message that is spreading out of the borders of Italy or Sicily, and I think now it's the time to be global readers in which we can so follow the message of Leonardo Sciascia, understanding more and more how literature and life are connected, as Fabio Finotti just said. So I greet you from the Associazione Amici di Leonardo Sciascia that was founded in 1993, a no-profit cultural organization. And we started actually in 2011 to study Sciascia around the world, so the reception of the writer, starting from Germany, from Middle East, from Switzerland, from Yugoslavia, and now we are working from the United States, obviously, and France. So actually we are following the writer, traveling all around to understand how a writer can be understood and received out of the border of the nation. But sometimes we still are too Italian in a way, let me say, in thinking that Sciascia is Sicilian, talking about mafia. Then we take a plane, unfortunately Sciascia didn't, but we travel around and we see that the reception is much wider than the one we are giving him sometimes, like the American one that we will discuss in these 2 days. There is a research project about Sciascia and North American culture, and this is the good opportunity to unveil all the researches, archival researches, ideas, new perspective on the writer that we are working on. As you can see, there is a table where we have our pillar of our association, Penny Brucoleri, that will be happy to show you all the books that we published and all the material, and so to renew the membership or to join the association just to support what we are doing around the world. So it's a great pleasure. They started once again more than a year ago, a slow one, a difficult one, as usual in organizing things, especially in a pandemic time, but we had lucky enough to find Fabio Finotti, Massimo Sarti, I want to thank you very much, Malina Mannarino, that I thank, all the staff of the Italian Cultural Institute, and I want to thank Anna Maria Di Giorgio, the director of the Italian Institute in San Francisco, that she hosted the first Lezione Sciasciana back in 2021 in San Francisco. And then I would like to really thank Alessandro Gonzalez, that I met in Rome along with Lorenzo Ortona. It was a great meeting, prospecting today around the world. We didn't know where, and then finally Fabio Finotti showed up and host us. So, thank you very much. So this long journey ended up 2 days ago when we presented our new book by Joseph Farrell, Leonardo Sciascia, The Man and the Rider, at the Rizzoli bookstore. It was absolutely great for us to see finally the American audience and to be so well accepted and so well, we started a good discussion on the rider and the man, the two sides of a beautiful coin that sometimes we forget following the message around the world, and sometimes we don't remember that it all comes from a human being. And so thanks to Joseph Farrell, now we have a critical biography that is an analysis of the two parts, so the man, once again, and the writer. So all that is fruit of a long journey, once again, a lot of people to thank, so all our associates, for example, and and we are trying these 2 days really, as I said before, to unveil new perspective of methodology in reading an author. There is always ahead. We think it's in America, and then we have to study France. We think it's in France, we go to the Middle East. And so, you know, the radiation of a mass of literature nowadays, as Senator Bonino said, as the ambassador said, is most important and more important day by day. And so literature can really help us because probably life is a metaphor in a way. So without further ado, I would really happy to introduce Domenico Scarpa, that is, eccolo qua, come stai Domenico? Domenico Scarpa doesn't really need an introduction.
Here I am.
Ciao.
Ciao.
He's the literary consultant of the Primo Levi Study Center in Torino. He has extensively published on Italo Calvino, Natalia Ginzburg, Giorgio Bassani, Franco Lucentini, and many, many others. With Anne Goldstein, he has published in another language, a dialogue on Primo Levi and translation. He edited the third volume of the Atlante della letteratura italiana, Dal Romanticismo a Oggi, published by Einaudi in 2012, and with Roberta Mori, Album Primo Levi in 2017. In addition, he published the collection of Lezioni Primo Levi, Mondadori 2019, and various anthologies, theatrical cycles, exhibitions, and television documentaries. In 2019, he curated works by Fruttero Lucentini for the Meridiani Mondadori, while for Einaudi, he edited the works by Natalia Ginzburg, and for Sellerio, the novels by Graham Greene, loved by Sciascia. With Einaudi, he also recently published Primo Levi's bibliography in 2022. But most importantly for us today is that last year, Domenico Scarpa has been the scientific director of the 12th Leonardo Sciascia Colloquium held by Treccani in Rome. And so it's really my great pleasure to introduce him, since I took his place in a way and I learned a lot about his guidance while he was this scientific director of the colloquium. So, benvenuto Domenico e grazie mille.
Thank you. Thank you. I will speak the first. Excuse me. I will speak the first or after Joe Farrell?
No, you go first.
I go first. Okay. I start. Yeah, thank you to Valerio Capozzo, to the Amici di Leonardo Sciascia, to the Italian Institute of Culture and the Committee for the Centenary of Sciascia. Yes, I've been in charge of the Leonardo Sciascia Colloquium for the centenary of Sciascia's birth. And its theme was the question, Sciascia, Primo Levi, Manzoni, justice, torture, intolerance. And there is a link, as we will see, with the themes of my intervention today. Meanwhile, I bring greetings from the Centro Internazionale di Studi Primo Levi in Turin, from its president, Fabio Levi, and its director, Daniela Muraca. We know that the only shared appearance of Sciascia and Levi together has been on the front page of the Corriere della Sera, the 3rd of January of 1979. Two interventions against the denial or the negationism of the Jewish extermination. They never met together. Ian Thompson has told that Sciascia told him that Primo Levi was the Italian writer he had the most wanted to meet, but there was never a meeting between them. No meeting, but correspondence. A complete and completely unpublished correspondence that I will show today to you. It consists of 2 letters by Levi, who started this brief exchange in a noticeable year, the 1968, and the 2 responses by Sciascia. Yes, the 2 responses, because until a few weeks ago, only 1 letter by Sciascia was known. The second, a letter that gives us the certainty about the completeness of this correspondence, has been found a few weeks ago in a messy array of miscellaneous papers in Primo Levi's private archive, which is in process of being sorted and inventoried. The annex of this Primo Levi's letter, dated by 26 February 1968, is even more interesting than the letter itself, as we will see briefly. I would like to thank for those materials, for those unpublished materials, and warmly the heirs of Leonardo Sciascia and of Primo Levi, the Fondazione Sciascia in Racalmuto with Salvatrice Graci, the Amici of Leonardo Sciascia with Francesco Izzo, the Centro Studi Levi with Fabio Levi and Cristina Zuccaro, who is the responsible for the archives. Levi and Sciascia has been two readers of history against the grain, to use an expression by Carlo Ginzburg and Edward Said. What does it mean to read the history against the grain? It means, in the words of Ginzburg, to look for those testimonies, for the testimonies of the dead and of the oppressed, to look into the testimonies, the traces of the oppression. And in this duty, Sciascia and Levi have been masterful, really. I will start with the Italian edition, the Italian first edition of the Day of the Owl. The first edition dating from 1961, and from its blurb, that is by Italo Calvino, even if it is not signed. Calvino writes in the incipit of this blurb, "Is it possible to write a story concerning a problem of our society? A story that be both a clear and thorough analysis of that problem, of its social, historical, political, and moral roots, a vibrant pamphlet of public denounce, and to write at the same time a really good story?" The question was rhetorical. The answer, Calvino's answer, was yes, because this novelette on the mafia was both a public denounce and a good and a well-written, well-recounted story. The same thing could be said both for The Day of the Owl and for If This Is a Man, for Levi's memoir on Auschwitz. And we have a confirm of this in a letter, in an unpublished letter, for which I thank a colleague of mine at the Centro, Martina Mengoni, a letter of Levi written on 26 December 1962 to Levi's translator into German, Heinz Ritt, the German translator of Se questo è un uomo, If This Is a Man, Ist das ein Mensch in German. Levi and Ritt got friend. Ritt was a great Italianist, an expert of Goldoni and Ruzzante. In 1962, Levi writes to Ritt, "I guess from your letter that your work does not give you much satisfaction. I'm sorry for that, but can't grasp the reason. Maybe nobody proposes to you some good and interesting Italian books. Couldn't you propose some book yourself? For example, The Day of the Owl by Sciascia has already been translated into German or not? It is a very good booklet on nowadays Sicily and on the mafia, written with the exactitude of a classic, with virile courage and with no lapses into local color and scandalism. And please note that any remark in this letter may be made by Levi could be translated into terms pertaining to the literary works of Primo Levi himself. there is a link between the two writers and their respective styles. I would like to read some lines from Sciascia's Coda to the Day of the Owl, because those lines will bring us to the core of my intervention that concerns, above all, America, the United States. Sciascia says, in Italy, as is well known, some things must not be made light of. So think what happens when one takes them seriously. In books and films, the United States of America can have imbecile generals, corrupt judges, and crooked police. So can England, France, at least up till the present, Sweden, and so on. Italy has never had, has not, and never will have them. With this start, we can start to read the first letter of Primo Levi to Sciascia. It is the 26th of February, 1968. This is the first letter which opens their brief correspondence. Do you hear me? Okay. Dear Sciascia, I have long wanted to write to you, to tell you that your books are beautiful and important. I sent no less than 5 copies of The Owl in different parts of the world, and just now I'm rereading it with unchanged admiration after seeing the movie, for the purpose of checking the movie, of course. Anyway, I'm now writing to you for a completely different reason. Please don't take me for crazy, but I wrote a letter, an ab irato letter, a wrathful letter, for President Johnson, and I enclose a copy. I am now looking for a few people, not many people, 5 or 6 will suffice. I'm looking for some well-known and unquestionable people, not too politicized, who could be willing to sign this letter of mine. Some friends have read it here in Turin, who finds it too strong, who finds it too mild, and everybody finds it too naive. In case you don't find it repulsive, I would be grateful to get, in addition to your signature, any remark of yours about it. I would try to have it published by La Stampa and maybe other dailies, other newspapers. What is the antifact, the before of this letter? That the newspapers of 22 February 1968 reported that the United States Army had bombed with napalm and gas the rebels in the imperial city of Hue, whose citadel they had already besieged for 3 weeks. I will read now a large part of the annexed Primo Levi of his ab irato, of his wrathful letter to President Johnson, which is typed on 2 sheets. Mr. President, the senders of this letter do not belong to any rigid and biased current of opinion. We belong to different political parties and tendencies, or to no one at all. But we think that our feelings are widely shared in our country and in Europe. We distrust those who scream no to the war. We are sadly aware that the war is rooted in the human nature. We also know that there are moments in history when a complete refusal of war is tantamount to suicide. However, we think that the ongoing war in Vietnam has lost any semblance of justification. We are today convinced that, let alone any present or future advantage your administration is trusting to get from it, such a war is spoiling any day more. Nay, it has already and radically stained the name of America before the world. It is the good name that America had gained in the European crusade against fascism. In comparison to with the current engagement of USA in the Far East appears as a monstrous caricature. Indeed, it appears as a reversal. The American soldier in Vietnam reproduces today, before the public opinion of the world, the ethical stance and, it seems, the military stance too, of our enemy of yesterday, of the Nazi occupier in Europe, of the Japanese invader in Asia. Once again, we are faced with a well-known situation, a powerful army of strangers that is trying to impose their will to a poor and courageous people exhausted by a long fighting, and an army that tries to legitimate its arbitrariness with more and more nonsensical pretexts. This view, I interrupt the reading to say that this view by Primo Levi, as we will see, was shared by many Italian writers, among them Italo Calvino, Sciascia himself, Natalia Ginzburg, and many others. With nuance, but the core of Levi's discourse was surely shared at that moment. I continue the reading of Primo Levi's letter to President Johnson. The war is poisoning the very human seed. It is breaking into a world that is about to be one. It is just the Vietnam front that separates the whites from the blacks in America, China from the rest of the world, Israel from the Arab countries, the children from their parents, the students from their teachers. As long as there will be fightings in Vietnam, not only the USA, but all the democracies will be discredited, and any form of authority will appear suspect as an accomplice of yours. If America does not want conflicts, it must extinguish these conflicts. This is the more noticeable, the most important part of Primo Levi's letter, which was never published on any newspaper. We have Sciascia's response of 1st March 1968, which was until today completely unknown. It has been found in Primo Levi's private archive some weeks ago. Dear Levi, surely I would sign your letter if there were not 2 points with which I disagree. First, my invincible loathing to address Johnson. It is as if, in order to end the mafia in Sicily, I would address Genco Russo. This is extraordinary on the part of Sciascia. Genco Russo was a prominent mafia boss between the US and Italy in the 50s. Addressing President Johnson is to me now in 1968 as if I was addressing Genco Russo. Couldn't the letter be addressed to the representatives of the people of the USA? Second, your statement that war is rooted in human nature. And this is one more point on which to make a reflection, a deep reflection, because we don't know, at least I don't know very well, the anthropological, biological roots of Sciascia's thoughts on this topic. What did Sciascia think about human nature and the origin of war? I continue the reading of Sciascia's letter. So, the disagreement was about addressing Johnson and about war rooted in the human nature. And Sciascia says, could you possibly modify those 2 points? In this case, consider me among the signatories. And I had a proposal translated and at our expense. Could we have it published on the New York Times? I hear that some dissident groups in America often do that. The letter will be not published because before receiving Sciascia's letter, Levi had already received a letter by Natalia Ginsburg, to which he had addressed the same Johnson letter we have already read, with many more reservations and disagreements on the text than Sciascia. I will not read it. It will be published together with the correspondence Sciascia-Levi, but it is certain that Levi's letter was not modified and was not published on any Italian newspaper. I will only remind you the Sciascia's text for the Cartella, the album Vietnam Libertà, which was published in April 1968 with 5 etchings by Ugo Attardi, Bruno Caruso, Renato Guttuso, Carlo Levi, and Renzo Vespignani. It is an extraordinary text in support of the Vietnamese people those days. And I will add that at the end of 1967, Levi and Sciascia were both asked by the Corriere della Sera, the most important newspaper of that age, to say what was their favorite book published during the current year. Sciascia said The Eighth Day by Thornton Wilder, and Primo Levi, surprisingly, the autobiography of Malcolm X, published by Einaudi in 1967. I will jump quickly to the second part of this brief correspondence, which takes place at the end of 1984, some 16 years after. Levi to Sciascia, 5 December 1984. Dear Sciascia, I am intensely reading your Occhio di Capra, but it would be more exact to say that I am studying it. Please note that I do not know Sicily otherwise than through books, and that I know nothing of its dialect. But this is just the reason why I am deeply interested to your exhibition of sayings and idioms. And this exhibition of yours brings to my mind many, many things. One is the following, that the fact of being a man of frontier like you, like myself as a Jew, like Mario Rigoni-Stern as a Cimbrian, like Fulvio Tomizza as originary from Istria, as Nuto Revelli as an Occitan, this being a man of frontier is a decisive advantage for a writer, an almost disloyal positive handicap in comparison with our colleagues who are Italians and nothing more. This book of yours seemed to me as rich as mine, And I have the impression that you could have written, instead of 123 pages, 600 or 800 of them. It is pious, pio, in the Latin sense of the word, and it is as well affilato, acuto ed arguto, sharp, acute and witty, as its characters are. And among them, I see as gigantically prominent as a Dante Alighieri figure the Salvatore Provenzano of "Ci sputasse vossia." Spit yourself on it. Spit, it is to say, spit to the seal, spit to seal the ballot paper already prepared with the vote in favor of Mussolini in the fake general political election of 1929. I resume reading Levi's letter to Sciascia. In the philological mood of the book, let me ask you a question. As a child, we are approximately the same age, Sciascia 21, Levi 1919, when we played hide and seek here in Turin. To stop the game, to call truce, we shouted the mysterious word Marsa. I see now that Marsa means in Arabian port or asylum. Marsala, Marsa Matru, says Levi. Is it possible that the origin be just that? How did you say in Sicily in the 20s? It is well known that the contine, children's contine, children rhymes in the play are international. They have no frontiers. What could you say? What could you tell me about that? Asks Levi to Sciascia at the end of his letter. We have to notice that Primo Levi had already published an article, The International of Children, L'Internazionale dei Bambini, at the end of 1980, 4 years before his second and last letter to Sciascia. And he presented just the example of Marsa in the 20s. And this question was in his mind even before reading the Sciascia's book, Occhio di Capra. Sciascia responds the 21 December of 1984, he doesn't know about Marsa. He will look for information. And it is a bitter and pessimistic, self-pessimistic letter. I read the main part of this letter. What you say is so true. This game of mine, of catching some voices, some idioms, and to explain them to myself and to the others, could be continued, albeit sporadically and occasionally, for the life that I have left to live, per la vita che mi resta da vivere, which is, for the time being, in my being sick, nel mio stare male, is made of moments, of flashes, è fatta di attimi, di sprazzi. And also, it is so true what you say about the advantage of us, men of frontier, on other writers. The advantage of us, men of frontier, on other writers. An almost desperate advantage sometimes. These letters that I've just finished to read will be obviously published in their entirety. Here, I would only like to finish with a similar episode that links the first and the second group of letters, the first and second couple of letters, that builds a bridge between those two historical and civil episodes. I will have to say that Levi addressed also Claude Lévi-Strauss, whose books he had translated on the contine and the expression of children plays, children games. And it was really, Levy's approach was really morphological, philological, historical, linguistic, and ethnographic. It was very, very in tune with Sciascia's approach in Occhio di Capra and with Sciascia's approach to Sicily and its culture. We have seen that Marsa is a port or asylum. We know that asylum means in English manicomio, bedlam. In the first letter, Levy fears to be sent to an asylum for being politically mad, politically crazy, by addressing President Johnson with his letter. Whilst in his second and last letter, asylum is not an institution for the crazy, for the mad. Asylum is a refuge for roots, for memories, for a language rooted in memory. And with this, I end my intervention. We will have to study in depth both the meanings of asylum and all the links between the asylums and between these two great Italian writers who, we have seen it, have looked to America, to the United States of America, in critical affection. Thank you for hearing this.
Thank you very much, Domenico Scarpa, for sharing with us for the first time this important and insightful research, and especially to start this colloquium, letting us understand how the myth, the literary myth of America and literary myth of the Mediterranean comes from the attraction of the two parts, but as well the rejection of the political part of the dictatorship in Italy and what was going on with the Vietnam War in the United States. So I think this colloquium is starting really well with the core of our argument today. There is, yes, once again, the attraction to other people to understand through the rejection that the brotherhood between human beings is exactly what American and Italian were looking for at that time. And so thank you, Domenico, once again. Now it's time to introduce, even if it doesn't need an introduction, our, as we call, rock star of the association, since we are here in New York, thanks to him in a way, because as I said before, we started the Rizzoli bookstore with Joseph Farrell. There's emeritus professor of Italian in Glasgow. In 2005, he was given the title of Cavaliere della Repubblica Italiana for his work promoting Italian culture abroad. He has published essays, books, articles on Dario Fo, Tommasi di Lampedusa, Valerio Varesi, Ugo Betti, Primo Levi, Natalia Ginsburg, Pirandello, Carlo Levi, Carmelo Bene, among many others. On Leonardo Sciascia has published relevant articles in scholarly journals and newspapers. Please be quiet. On Leonardo Sciascia has published relevant articles in scholarly journals and newspapers. He is the translator of The Night and Death and A Straightforward Tale, and is currently a member of the advisory board of Todo Modo, the scholarly journal published by Olsky, thanks to on behalf of the Associazione Amici di Leonardo Sciascia. His first book on Sciascia was published back in 1995 by Edinburgh University Press. And 2 days ago, as I said before, we had the honor to celebrate here in New York his biography on Leonardo Sciascia, The Man and the Rider. And it was presented by Fabio Finotti with the collaboration of Gaetana Marrone. Thank you very much, Joe, and please help me in welcoming Joe Farrell.
Thank you, Valerio. Thank you. It gives me another opportunity to express my gratitude to those people who suggested I write this book, and also, another problem.
Only just a second.
Okay. The more technology we have, the more difficult things become. I shall not be doing any kind of technological wizardry. You'll have to listen to me, I'm afraid, nothing else than that. Right, in this talk I intend to bring together the two aspects that we're discussing this morning. And that is to say, the Italian or European myth of America on the one hand, and then the more famous American dream, which I understand is now returned as a subject for conversation. So, of all the downtrodden, exploited or vinti characters who appear in Sicilian literature, and specifically in the fiction of Leonardo Sciascia, few suffer a more wretched fate than the pathetic group depicted in the short story Il lungo viaggio, the long journey. They're first seen as a huddled mass, fearful but hopeful, on a stretch of beach in the south of Sicily, at some points between the towns of Gela and Licata, the very spot, and it cannot be a coincidence, where in 1943 the American 7th Army stormed the shore as part of Operation Husky to pursue the war against fascism and Nazism. Some of the group were from inland villages in Sicily and had never previously seen the sea. But every one of them had sold all they had, including, and I'll quote in English, the low house, the mule, the donkey, the year's harvest, the sideboard, the bedclothes to raise the money to pay, half on embarking and half on arrival, the people trafficker who would transport them to America. The fact that the, quote, the important thing was to land in America made it in their eyes a worthwhile sacrifice. It would allow them to follow in the steps of friends and relatives to a country where there were, quote, big warm houses and cars as big as houses, end of quote. They'd seen relatives leave Sicily, quote, starving, emaciated and sunburned, and return 20 or 30 years later for a brief holiday with well-fed, pale faces, which set off nicely their fair hair, end of quote. Their dream of America overflowed with dollars. Trenton, New Jersey was the destination, but of course they were cheated. And after 11 nights at sea, were disembarked under cover of darkness at another desolate beach in Sicily. Their despair is left unstated. The account is tragic, but were they in any case enthralled by a vision of America which was a mere mirage? What would those hardy travellers have found had they not been hoodwinked, and if they had in fact arrived in the USA? Can we reconstruct both the myth in which they had put their trust and the reality immigrants, especially illegal immigrants, were likely to find? The uniqueness and poignancy of this situation is that two conflicting sets of hopes, dreams, or myths were in play. On the one hand, the creation by actual or aspiring immigrants from Europe of a myth of America, and then the other, the much discussed Native American dream, a term which has to be rendered in capital letters. You don't see the capital letters, but you will when you eventually read it. The European and the specifically Italian dream of America is easier to elucidate. The French writer and thinker Michel Foucault coined the term heteropia. The French, as you will be aware, have a genius for coining obscure terms. But this term is coined to designate other worlds, either inner or outer, worlds of the imagination or of self-deceiving, unconsciously transformed observation. The central feature of a heteropia, which he derived, of course, from the Greek heteros and utopia, is that it is removed from day-to-day reality. The dream of those Sicilian peasants on the shore in Sciascia's fiction was of escape to another and a better place, which may mean that America had for the poor or the plucky of Europe many of the characteristics of Peter Pan's Never, Never Land. Those crossing the Atlantic were motivated by a yearning to escape from the world they inhabited, to flee from poverty, from persecution, from oppression, from injustice, so as to live in a society where hard work was rewarded, where prosperity and dignity were at hand. The constituent elements of this vision of America were purely materialistic, even if given sometimes imprecisely spiritual overtones. It was based on the prospect of making a fresh start in a land where human beings were treated fairly under the law, where maltreatment by potentates was unknown or punished, where hunger and want could be eliminated, and crucially, where poverty deriving from the social immobility of a rigid class system could be overcome. Born a peasant, die a peasant was the prospect at home. But in this imaginary America, people, previously downtrodden, could aspire to the dignity they instinctively believed to be their right. The meticulous historian will have some problems with accuracy and authenticity, but from these aspirations, some elements can be forged into one sprawling and multifaceted myth, specific enough to act as a motivator. The grander ideals of the founding fathers of freedom, democracy, and equality under law were only a minor part of this yearning, since essentially the hope was individual and not collective. The dilemmas associated with the myth of America are viewed differently in various points in Sciascia's career. But no Italian writer gave it more powerful expression than the anti-fascist activist and writer Carlo Levi, not Primo Levi, Carlo Levi. He was sentenced under Mussolini to a period of confino, internal exile, in a village named Galliano in the deep south of Italy, and wrote a superb memoir, Christ Stopped at Eboli, where he gave an account of what he called the civiltà contadina, the peasant civilization as he saw it. As part of this cultural vision of his peasants, he provided the most penetrating of all analyses of the myth of America. One of his more picturesque but acute observation was that the two images most frequently found in the houses of the impoverished villagers were on the one hand the Madonna and on the other hand President Roosevelt. They were found hanging side by side, occasionally with a third image, which was of a dollar bill. The canvases illustrated the totality of cosmic power in their universe. The Madonna being a promise of peace beyond the grave, and Franklin Delano Roosevelt representing the prospect of prosperity in the hic et nunc. Paradoxically, the expressions of the two were the opposite of what might have been expected. I quote, "The Madonna was the ferocious, pitiless, dark, archaic goddess of the earth, the Saturnian lady of this world. The president was a kind of Zeus, the benevolent and smiling God, the lord of the other world." End of quotation. The peasants were totally alienated from their own homeland and its government. I quote, "Not Rome, not Naples, but New York was the real capital of these peasants from Lucania, if these stateless men could ever have one," unquote. However, Levi was no naive innocent and cast a jaundiced eye on the peasant myth, detecting in it a double nature which set opposite to each other the real USA and the dreamland. As a place of work, and I quote, "America is no different from anywhere else," he writes uncompromisingly. He continues, "One lives there as one would live elsewhere, like beasts yoked to a cart. And it makes no difference which streets you have to haul it along. As paradise, the heavenly Jerusalem, well, it is untouchable. All you can do is contemplate it from the far side of the ocean without getting involved with it." The satirical bitterness of these lines shatters the myth. Levi also, and I'm going to cut back a bit, devotes some time to the plight of those who go to America and who come back, like Sciascia's father, to whom I will return. He says that they return and they take up once again the age-old cycle of the same eternal poverty they'd known years previously. With that poverty, resignation, patience, and all the old peasant ways return. All that distinguishes these Americani is a greater bitterness and a regret for a lost good. However, these experiences of those who come back in no way undermines the social or the mental force of the myth of other aspiring peasants. Myths are founded on dreams, aspirations, longings, yearnings, not on a grasp of material fact. The myth is impervious to empirical evidence. What I find curious is that the peasant myth can be compared and contrasted with the American dream. However imprecise or ill-defined, it was an integral part of an American cultural outlook and contains, like all waking dreams, a vague call of an imaginary past as well as a yearning for an unreachable future. It dates from the Pilgrim Fathers in many ways, even if they never formulated, and was founded on truths that are taken to be self-evident for the believers, but scoffed at by skeptics. The dream was not intended to be historical or even philosophical, and indeed it has been chronicled, especially in literature, better by the scoffers who were more forceful and articulate than the believers. The first formulation of the dream, however inchoate, is generally attributed to W.M. Thayer in Log Cabin to White House, a biography of President James Garfield, offered as inspirational. At an everyday level, the dream promoted equal opportunity, unlike the restrictions on upward mobility inherent in a European and especially a British class-based system. In capitalist society, it promised family rising wealth measured by a better car yearly, for the husband regular promotion at work, and for the wife, before the rise of feminism, a happy domestic life attending to the kids and to their education. That life made easier by the introduction of ever more sophisticated kitchen devices. The dream is ahistorical, having cancelled all negative aspects of American past or present, and was satirized or indeed savaged by writers such as Sinclair Lewis in Babbitt, 1922, John Steinbeck in Grapes of Wrath, and in theatre, above all, by Arthur Miller in a series of plays, All My Sons, Death of a Salesman, and the one I want to talk about, being particularly relevant for our discussion, A View from the Bridge, a tale set in a Sicilian community in Brooklyn. Sorry, I'm just taking a drink of water. People always get excited when they see him. They wonder what's he going to do. Is the water going to squirt out of his ears or something? No, it's just a glass of water, and it's not gin. The play, a tragedy in terms the Greeks would have understood, dramatises the story of Eddie Carbone, who is destroyed by uncontrollable inner forces, his illicit love for his adopted daughter, Catherine. But the work also implicitly dramatises questions of identity and the struggle to define or alter identity. Miller himself wrote that having told the story, he delayed writing it as a theatre piece since, and I quote, "as a whole, its meaning escaped me," unquote. Seeing Catherine fall in love with an illegal immigrant, Rodolfo, who was newly arrived from Italy, to whom Eddie and his wife, Beatrice, had given refuge, arouses uncontrollable jealousy and drives Eddie to break the code of his community by denouncing him to the immigration department. As a consequence, Rodolfo's brother engages him in a duel in which Eddie is killed. The inner catastrophe of Eddie emerges from the masterful dialogue and actions, but the wider community sense is entrusted to the lawyer Alfieri, who is a part in the unfolding action, but who acts as a chorus, deepening the meaning and impact of the play. And I would love to know why Arthur Miller chose the name Alfieri, if he had at the back of his mind the 18th century Italian tragedian Vittorio Alfieri, or if he simply chose it by chance. I don't know the answer to that. The question which Alfieri puts is, what do the hopeful immigrants bring with them? What do they have to jettison? What can they acquire? Eddie was, as quoted in the play, as good a man as he had to be in a life that was hard and even. But Alfieri himself, although born in Italy, has adopted American ways and beliefs, notably the conviction that in America, unlike in Sicily, and I quote, and it's a wonderful quotation, now we settle for half, and I like it better. Now I no longer keep a pistol in my filing cabinet, unquote. Alfieri has a deep sense of history, so that when, as happens every few years, some troublesome case comes up, he notices that, and I quote, the flat air in my office suddenly washes in with the green scene of the sea. The dust of this air is blown away, and the thought comes that in some Caesar's year in Calabria, perhaps, or on the cliff at Syracuse, another lawyer, quite differently dressed, heard the same complaint and sat there as powerless as I and watched it run its bloody course, unquote. In despair, Catherine proposes that she and Rodolfo could go and live as a married couple in Italy, but Rodolfo angrily rejects the idea, since he knows that he would be able to, quote, start something wonderful here in America. It's not that he's come to despise Italy, and I now quote him. You think we have no tall buildings in Italy? Electric lights? No wide streets? No automobiles? Only work we don't have. I want to be an American so that I can work. It's the only wonder here, work. That, at least, is the dream or the myth, Italian and America, that have driven him on. The prospect of the freedom to work, to do something wonderful. But for that he requires American citizenship, and that in turn causes Eddie to believe that he's merely exploiting Catherine. Marriage to her would guarantee the right of residence. The other side of the coin is that on arrival, he finds refuge in a community of longshoremen who have, to Alfieri's dismay, retained a code of Sicilian values and are unwilling to settle for half. The mere fact of residence in America does not imply adherence to the American way, nor does it guarantee American identity. If I come back now to Leonardo Sciascia, his wider vision of America was a tangled compound of clashing notions and reactions. He never deviated from his respect for contemporary American writing, of which I've heard a lot. In his youth, he was aware of the famous anthology Americana, edited by Elio Vittorini, first published in 1941, but then withdrawn by the censors. He described it as, I quote, an ideal bridge between American literature and Italian readers. At different times, he provided lists of the American authors he read after the ending of fascist censorship, expressing admiration and indebtedness for widening and deepening his outlook. After discussing some photographs of American soldiers from the invading army, he continues, and I'll give the quote in English, and we too in our 20s, with the myth of America, which did not come from relatives and friends, brackets of friends, but from passionate reading directed by Vittorini and Pavese of Faulkner, Hemingway, Steinbeck, Caldwell, and Sarayan. What do you make of America? Asked the title of a book by Sarayan, translated by Vittorini. Freedom, democracy, the New Deal, the frontier of a new world, was our reply. This was the idealistic intellectual vision, far removed from the peasant myth. But this view was tempered by other notions. In his remarkable interview with Marcel Padovani, or Padovani, since she was by then a French citizenship, he suggested that the popular view of America was not deeply established, and that America acquired positive connotations in the post-war period. He said, and once again I quote in English, feeling towards America changed only with the last war. In the age when America could, according to its mood, let us live or die. The children were dressed in American clothes, t-shirts and pullovers. They received parcels of used clothes, or else bought them at the market or from traveling salesmen who came from the ports to sell their rejected items, unquote. With all respect to Sciascia, I think that the myth had acquired a positive patina in earlier decades, as Carlo Levi noted. But he's right when he goes on to identify the place of popular culture in the post-war years, notably cinema, in constructing a myth, even as a fantastic one, more of the Wild West than of urban America. Sciascia himself frequented the local cinema, as did Gesualdo Bufalino, and many years later both recognized the truth of the village vision of America in Giuseppe Tornatore's Oscar-winning film Nuovo Cinema Paradiso. However, Sciascia was also an astute observer of international as well as of national politics. And on his opinions of American power and influences, he was decidedly more jaundiced. In his view of America, he was going against the tide, as he explains in the continuation of the passage I've just quoted. At that time, too, I too modified my feeling towards America, but in the opposite direction. The America of Dos Passos, Steinbeck, Caldwell, Faulkner, and Hemingway became the America which supported in Sicily the worst of men and the worst of policies. This was, of course, the period of the Cold War, when America was desperate to oppose communism, and of course, as you're aware, the Italian Communist Party was the biggest in Europe, even including countries such as Hungary and Poland. There were, in other words, in Sciascia's mind, two competing visions: his own private literary myth of America and his perception of public policy and politics. They were irreconcilable. To this has to be added, and I'll not go on about it since it's been discussed, his awareness of the experiences of his father Pasquale, known in Racalmuto as the Americano, and in this as much else, corresponding precisely to the type of returning immigrant described by Carlo Levi. He'd spent various years there. We could also go on to talk about Sciascia's relationship with his father, but that is another matter which we will leave. Sciascia's father Pasquale did join the American army in World War I, although he never came to Europe. He never fought in Flanders. Sciascia sums the matter up for his fathers. For him, America was unacceptable and unspeakable. When he returned to Racalmuto, he wanted to cancel it all, as though that period had never existed. The few others who, like him, had managed to repatriate themselves kept tight-lipped, as if making them thinner whenever anyone mentioned America in their hearing. With this background, there was a certain inevitability in finding diverse treatment of relationships with America in Sciascia's fiction, principally in La Zia d'America, the aunt from America, and then the later Candido, and Sogno fatto in Sicilia, Candido, or A Dream Dreamed in Sicily. Both narratives are laced with irony and an undercurrent of bitterness. The novella The Aunt from America is set in the days after the landing of the American army in 1943. And although narrated in the first person by a boy in a Sicilian village, it skillfully presents different perspectives of members of the family in Sicily and of the American aunt who is making a return visit to the family and the village she had left years previously. The boy can scarcely contain his excitement or his enthusiasm over the very idea of America as he awaits the arrival of American soldiers. I too was waiting for the Americans. My mother told me about America, that she had a wealthy sister with a big store, and she had 4 children. And America for me was my aunt's big store, a shop as big as Piazza di Castello, filled with good things, clothes and coffee and pieces of meat. An Italo-American soldier, Tony, engages the narrator and his friend Filippo in conversation, mixing his eulogy of America with an implied contempt for Italy. Americans work, said Tony. They work and they have shoes. They also have nice clothes, lovely houses and cars. Italians don't want to work. Nobody wants to work here, neither the rich nor the poor. That's great for the rich, better than America. These kindly but demeaning marks are a foretaste of the behavior of the ant. And I'll leave that. If the myth of America is portrayed skeptically in The Ant from America, it's totally dismissed by the time Candido was published in 1977. The post-war vision of America has now been definitively replaced by a portrayal of America as an alien power whose influence is damaging and unwelcome. Although subtitled The Dream Dreamed in Sicily, Candido, the novel, is in essence a picaresque novel, illustrating its protagonist's attempt to confront the dominant belief systems in contemporary Italian society, political Catholicism, and Marxism. But before he can tackle these matters, he has to confront American questions. His mother initially wished to call him Bruno after Mussolini's son, but Candido was born, plainly this is no accident, on the 9th of July 1943 during the American, more strictly we should say the British-American invasion of Sicily, but the British have been written out of this story, at least in Sicily. So he changed their mind and gave him a name which suggested a new beginning. Names matter. Questions of paternity and of American influence are intricately linked from the very outset. His natural father is unquestionably the lawyer Munafort, but Munafort begins to entertain doubts when he notes a surprising physical resemblance between his son and an American officer, John H. Dyke, who has become a frequent visit to the house and forms a relationship with his wife, although unquestionably only after Candido's birth. The hypothesis, however grotesque, that Dykes could be Candido's father begins to obsess Munafort. But the underlying implication is that Candido, like others of the new generation, cannot escape the overarching American presence. Having arrived in Sicily with the 7th Army, Dykes is a member of the conquering authority and represents the power then prevailing in every aspect of post-war life, political, economic, and cultural in Italy. Candido even becomes known as the Americano. His real father kills himself and his grandfather, a fascist turned Christian Democrat, takes on some sort of paternal role, while Dykes, now married to Candido's mother, becomes a stepfather. It means that the boy has 3 father figures. One Sicilian, one American, and one we can call Italian because of his fascist part, all of whom play some part in the formation of his personality and his mindset. American popular culture, especially in cinema, formed the mental habitat, dreams and aspirations of Italians. Dykes first appealed to Maria Grazia, Candido's mother, precisely because his seductive, romantic behavior towards her is the way Hollywood had made her anticipate an American woodard. He returns to the house when her husband is away, exchanges unsure glances with her, takes her in his arms, kisses her on the cheek, and finally on the lips, quote, just like in a film, thought Maria Grazia, an American film. Dykes performs his own act of self-slaughter by removing himself from the scene with Candido's mother to America. But as an American, Dykes could not be wholly eliminated. There is no trace in this novel of the previous beguiling myth of America, which has been consigned to the past. But however comic the presentation of Dykes, he is a reminder of the inescapable fact of American influence. The myth of America, in the more romantic sense, has no continuing force, but in culture, as in political life, the presence of America lingers on.
Now you see he's the author of Leonardo Sciascia, The Man and the Rider. So thank you very much, especially for introducing us many elements of Americanismo in some way of Leonardo Sciascia, and especially his father, and then to make the distinction between myth, dream. And so that's, I think, really the core of our colloquium. So now we would like to open the floor to you if you have any question for our 2 wonderful speakers. Of the 2 speakers have any observation that they want to share one another. And so please, I think we have a microphone for them. Domenico, anche te se hai delle osservazioni per Joe, come si mette questo?
Che altro dopo i primi 10 minuti non si è sentito più nulla, è disturbatissima.
Ah, mi dispiace.
Questo mi dispiace di dirlo, ma non ho più sentito nulla. L'ho anche scritto nella chat.
Facciamo un riassunto.
No, vabbè.
No, però appunto come dicevo...
E anche adesso, vedi?
ecco,
Anche
questo.
adesso. Non so se è quel microfono lì.
Sì, credo che sia un problema di connessione. Quindi scusa. Any question? Any... So Domenico, oh yeah, Salvatore Pappalardo has a question for...
In English, right? So thank you very much to both speakers. I very much enjoyed kind of opening up of the discussion. I'm really interested in the question of the American dream, and I appreciated Dr. Farrell's hint to Foucault and heterotopia, right? Which in Foucault is always suspended between a utopia, which is often what America is seen as, but also a dystopia, which is what America becomes for the peasants in Il Lungo Viaggio. And so I think of myth as something that can be created, but also as something that can be debunked, right? And so the impression that I get from both of the talks is that for Sciascia, the American myth is again this tension between a dream and a nightmare, between a utopia and a dystopia. And I was wondering if you could kind of expand on that a little bit. Thank you.
As I said, curious enough, before we came here, we were staying with a relative of mine in Lexington, and his daughter turned up with the. Okay, that's better. We were staying with a relative of mine, American, in Lexington, and by chance his daughter was about to embark on a course at her school on the American dream. And what struck me as I read down it was that almost entirely, well, it took a historical sweep, went back to the Pilgrim Fathers, and said, I am dubious about this, but it said that the dream was actually based in a sermon given by one of the clergymen who came over in the Mayflower and then had developed from there. This is possible because obviously the Pilgrim Fathers certainly were of the kind that I spoke about, that they were escaping from oppression in England. The desire to escape was not, in fact, exclusively Italian, obviously. As a matter of fact, my parents immigrated when I was only 3-year-old. They went to Canada rather than to the USA, but they were motivated by precisely this matter. The same sort of hopes and aspirations that were not fulfilled, and they come back. They were not referred to as Americans. They were able to reintegrate themselves into society. It happened all over Europe. But it does occur to me that the dream has been used more. There's a novel by Norman Mailer with exactly that title, The American Dream. And he scoffs at it. He undermines it. He undermines it. What I was interested in was the conflict, if you like, or the parallels and also the divisions between, on the one hand, what we can call the European, or today we're discussing the Italian myth of America, and setting that in some ways alongside the American dream, as it has been much discussed. And the fact then that certain, if I can put it this way, certain immigrants, including Pasquale Sciascia, Leonardo Sciascia's father, were motivated by the myth, perhaps by the dream, but they found that the reality was altogether different, and they then came back. So that was the nature of the clash, which I think underlies much of what Sciascia was writing on this subject.
Thank you, Salvatore, and thank you, Joe, for your answer. Domenico, can you hear well?
Nothing at all.
Mi dispiace, sì, c'è un evidente problema di connessione, ma
Ti sento bene da qui. Tutto il resto, non una parola.
allora mi tocca parlarti. Altre domande? Do you have any other?
Se arrivano domande, me le traduci, sì.
Ah, sure. Do you have any other
Sì, sì.
question, especially for Domenico, now that we have? Domenico, do you know any other Italian writers that try to write to American president with the same kind of aim that Primo Levi had in contrasting the politics, the foreign politics of the United States?
No, not the same thing. There is that book, Authors Take Sides on Vietnam, which was published 1 year before this exchange between Sciascia and Levi. It is to say in 1967. And there, among the respondents, the Italians were a strange group: Giovanni Arpino, Giuseppe Berto, and Italo Calvino. And among those three, Italo Calvino was the most strong against the military intervention in Vietnam. The more close to the positions of Sciascia and Levi. But letters, open letters to, I don't know. I have no news about that.
It could be interesting to understand if some American intellectual was second what Primo Levi thought or what Calvino and the other intellectual you were saying. So an American side of a critic that could help Italians to communicate with overseas. You see what I mean?
Oh well, in this case we have a hint because there is a book, Hanoi, by Mary McCarthy, which was translated by Mondadori, even by Mondadori in Italian in those years. And then in the Cartella, Vietnam Libertà, Sciascia quotes extensively an article by Norman Mailer that appeared on the New York Times, and it is a pillar of his issue about the Vietnam War. Norman Mailer, in this case.
Yeah, and today, this afternoon, we will discuss about the relationship between Leonardo Sciascia and the New York Times. So I think what he just said,
okay,
it's important for this afternoon. Alessandro? Oh, that's very interesting. Alessandro Giammè is asking, is volunteering actually to go to probably President Johnson library, personal library, to check if there is any documentation or any proof or evidence, yeah, and having the Giorno della Civetta. So just to know if on the other side and so on the Johnson side we have a witness of Sciascia's thought. That's the first part of the question.
Okay.
And the second part of the question is if there, in Primo Levi's mind, there was the idea to have a group of intellectuals that could sign as a group of intellectuals moving the criticism in which Primo Levi was titled to send him.
Oh, well, apart from Sciascia and Natalia Ginsburg, we don't know any other names of writers or intellectuals that he addressed to get their signature for his letter, his open letters. Only those two. And with Levi, 3. He said 5 or 6. We have already 3 names out of 5 or 6.
Thank you, Domenico. We have another question, I guess, by Francesca Maria Corrao? No? Mm. Ah sì, dice Pagliarani con la ragazza Carla che è stata tradotta in inglese in quegli anni. Ok, e quindi the relationship between la ragazza Carla and e Ferlinghetti, sure. So it's another plus, actually, an addition to what we are saying. So as we can see, as soon as we start a discussion, we add people, even the group didn't sign, as Alessandro was thinking, didn't probably send a document or a request or something, but actually we can now later understand there was a group of people that were sharing the same thought. That's why we're here, actually. That's why we are studying those things.
Yeah.
We have a question by Giulia Pelizzato. You want a microphone?
Thank you. This is a question for Domenico Scarpa, and I wanted to go back to the blurb by Calvino that he quoted. That was very interesting for me. I would like to hear from Domenico if you would say that this blurb is exemplary of Sciascia's reception in Italy, because I would like to think about it comparatively, thinking of the US-American reception. So would you say this was an emblematic synthesis of the Italian reception or not? And if you could add something more.
So Giulia Pelizzato is asking if Italo Calvino's blurb in the Giorno della Civetta is kind of exemplary of the reception in Italy of Leonardo Sciascia, if it could be used as another good kind of reception in the United States.
If you can use the Italo Calvino's blurb for the reception in the USA.
In Italy.
Oh well, this is a milestone, but it is not signed. Few people know that this blurb is by Italo Calvino. This is the fact.
But even behind the name of the author, that you know, obviously, but even behind the name, even if we don't know if there is Italo Calvino, I think your question is implied what I'm saying. Yeah, if it's exemplary how the book is understood, doesn't matter now the name of the author or the writer in this case.
It is, in my view, an avant-garde of the Italian reception of the book, because local color, mafia, and so on were prominent in the first Italian reception of Leonardo Sciascia. The exception are just this blurb by Italo Calvino, and I would add the reason for giving him the prize written by Giacomo De Benedetti. There are two bright exceptions to the first reception of Sciascia, of the Day of the Owl. I will quote those two, yeah.
Thank you. Any other question?
I would add something about the open letters, because a sort of open letter about the Vietnam War could be considered the music by Luigi Nono, A Floresta e Joven e Cheia de Vida, that he wrote with the libretto by Giovanni Pirelli, very appreciated by Calvino, by the way. This is a public message. This was a public message.
Thank you. We have another question now?
Yes. First of all, thank you for this interesting intervention for both of you. And I have a question for the Professor Fowler. And I would like just to know what kind of intellectual relationship between Sciascia and Carlo Levi, because I heard about him and Chris. I would like just to know about this intellectual relationship between those Carlo Levi and Leonardo Sciascia. Yes, thank you.
Well, they have a very sort of a view of things. I'm not aware. They had very
similar political and literary attitudes. I'm not and I'm not aware that there was an exchange of letters. I may be mistaken in that, or that they frequented each other. But one of Carlo Levi's other books was indeed set in Sicily. I'm sorry, my memory's failing very badly and I can't remember, but it was actually devoted, or it dealt also with the murder by the mafia of a trade union. Le parole sono pietre, is the one. Le parole sono pietre, which was then set in Sicily. So I think that with these two men, we're dealing really with a convergence of attitude. It's very often the critic's game to try and identify influence and actually to ignore the fact that two people can come to comparable conclusions, more or less independently. So I don't think, but I'm subject to correction, that Carlo Levi and Leonardo Sciascia had much contact with each other, except of a purely literary sort. I'm not aware of any time opinions expressed by one or the other, but they were very similar in their vision of life, the vision of politics and of literature, unquestionably.
Thank you, thank you.
No, I think I can give an answer, but I will speak about it later in my paper. And Leonardo Sciascia and Carlo Levi, they were friends. They were together in 1970, December 15 in Ghibellina, and the anniversary of the earthquake. And they were both in Italian parliament, but Sciascia was the Radical Party and Levi was the Communist Party. And they, I mean, I'm sure they were friends because they were a friend of my father, who was in parliament also that time. And they didn't only meet in Ghibellina University, but they met many other times since they were standing on more or less on the same side. And so, but I will tell it later. Thank you.
There was a great preview of the next session that, thank you very much. Yeah. So I was saying the next session that we'll explore the myth of Mediterranean, as you know, and then now we are entering in the discussion actually is the double myth from the two coasts of the Atlantic Ocean. And I think now we're meeting the two parts of the myth just to realize how myth is a representation of reality as literature, so it's the voice of all that. Voice means dialogue, dialogue usually between friends. And so people, they share the same intent more than a friendship just by itself. So please join us with a coffee break. Domenico, I guess you can have a good Italian coffee now. And we really thank you very much for sharing your research today. And thank you to Joseph Farrell.
Thank you to you all.
Ciao Domenico, grazie mille.
Ciao.